I'm filming this on Tuesday night. I'm not really in a good mood. Something happened today with my main vehicle, which, if you want that story, stick around to the end of this video and I will tell you what happened, because everything in my life is convoluted, but something that does make me happy, something that brings a smile to my cold, dead heart, is emulation. I love emulation. And obviously, when you talk about Nintendo and emulation, it's pretty much like oil and water. They don't mix very well, if at all. Nintendo is very against emulation in all forms, except for, you know, the form they use for Nintendo Switch Online, because that's all emulators. But I guess it's different because it's Nintendo. But with emulators, we've seen, of course, Nintendo go after different places. ROM hosting websites who were getting money, and most recently, the Yuzu situation. Yuzu got sued by Nintendo. They were taking them to court. Yuzu was like, yeah, we're going to go to court. I ain't scared. I ain't scared. And then like 2 days later, they were like, we're scared. And then they blamed the users of Yuzu for the downfall of it and put all the blame on them, except for the fact that Yuzu was sharing, you know, links in their Discord. They were sharing links on their Patreon on how to download games and, you know, how to get games running and product keys and stuff like that. Very highly illegal stuff if you know anything about emulation, which kind of makes it a gray area. So with Yuzu gone, obviously there's a bit of a hole, a gaping hole, if you will, within the Nintendo Switch emulation world. Now, Ryujinx still exists, and at least at the time of the filming of this video, it seems like Ryujinx is okay, but really time will tell with that sort of situation. If Nintendo can get some dirt on them, they'll probably use that and try to exploit them. But with the demise of Yuzu, more emulators for the Nintendo Switch are popping up, including a brand new one called Suyu. Yes, it's S-U-Y-U, a play of words, if you will, on the whole Yuzu situation. And what's interesting about this is Suyu is being very upfront with what they're doing, how they're doing things, and how they're handling things. And Nintendo's got to be pissed off about this, because they are actually doing due diligence with this to make sure that there's no way that Nintendo can attack them. So I want to talk about the Suyu emulator. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to do. If this is your first time on the channel, hit that subscribe button. We're looking at this article here from Ars Technica, which has, here's how the makers of Suyu Switch emulator plan to avoid getting sued. Suyu sued? Oh, punny. I love a good pun. There's their little logo right there. Okay, I get what's going on here. So basically, it starts out saying, you know, it's pronounced Suyu, this, that, and the other. But how are they going to avoid Nintendo's policies? Well, they basically go on to say that they like talk to an attorney, to someone with legal experience, 3 years of law school. So they decided to avoid any monetization with this project, meaning that they're not going to have, you know, a Patreon or a Profit or a Dono link or something like that, because really I feel like that's what kind of put Yuzu on the map, was their $30,000 a month Patreon. You know, you're making money off this emulator, which, you know, that kind of goes against a lot of principles of emulation to begin with. If you're really sitting there being like, this is about preservation, you're not going to charge for the emulator. You know, if you want to have a donation link, you know, like to an account or whatever, okay, that's a little bit different. But when you're, you know, paywalling stuff behind this paywall, and within that paywall, you're adding in games, you're adding in product keys and stuff like that, which I'll explain what product keys are in just a minute, that kind of makes the whole situation a lot more suspect than other emulators. So that's kind of an interesting thing. They're also not going to be providing step-by-step guides that ones like Yuzu did on how to play copyright games on their emulator. So once again, if they're not providing the how-to guide, but somebody else is, like, that's okay. You know, that's not a reflection on them. That's just someone doing it on their own time, making a video about how to do it and how to set everything up. So once again, a very, very smart decision, kind of putting it back on the community. And if Nintendo wants to go after the community, I mean, I guess they could try, but really, like, with my emulation video for the Nintendo Switch where I set up Ryujinx. Like, there's nothing in there that's, you know, considered against what Nintendo does as far as their encryption is concerned, because that all comes with actually, you know, dumping the games, getting product keys, which once again, I'll talk about product keys in just a second. So to eliminate the how-to setup guide and just rely on the community to do it, I think that's actually a pretty smart idea. Because you could see here, you know, here is their Patreon. This is the Patreon for Yuzu, basically saying, hey, look, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition up and running. You know, here's what we're working on. So it's like, that looks very suspect, especially to a company like Nintendo, who's trying to, you know, keep their games from being ripped off, even though we still have the whole situation of how the games get out there. The #1 rule listed on the Suyu Discord is privacy is prohibited. That includes any talk about downloading games or asking for system files, ROMs, encryption keys, shader keys, and discussion of leaked games. So that's an interesting preventative measure. And then here's kind of the main thing here is bring your own keys. One of the major parts of the Nintendo Switch lawsuit was the generation of title keys by Yuzu, referring to game-specific encryption keys used by the emulator at runtime. This is one of the first things we're removing/reworking. Suyu will require the user to provide their own title keys, product keys, and firmware from their own Switch console. Now, they go on to say, in order to use Suyu, you'll have to have keys from your real Switch system and games which you have legally obtained and pay for, but there's not really a way to verify the keys were dumped legitimately from the user's Switch, because as it stands right now, there are lots of websites out there where you can download product keys, you could download you know, the title keys, and you could download the latest Nintendo Switch firmwares. They're just not the ones providing it. They are simply providing a platform in which emulation is possible if you dump your own stuff or you do this, that, or the other, wherever you get it from. As long as you have it, they're not the ones providing it to you. So that really creates this gray area that I almost feel like Ryujinx sort of falls into, because as far as I know, Ryujinx themselves, they don't actually provide any title keys or product keys or firmwares or anything like that. They tell you you have to have them. You have to get them from your legally received games and your Switch system. But of course, I mean, there are a lot of ways around that and a lot of websites. They also say that you know, they're going slow with it. They're not wanting to rush things because they want to sort of make sure that everything is in line. You know, they say that you're better off running Ryujinx or an old Yuzu build instead, and that if you're a developer, you know, that's cool. We'll support will only be given if you're a developer, both for legal reasons and because we want to have a more tangible process to show before providing any compiled builds. They are taking their time slow. We wanted to fly under the radar at the start until we could at least figure out what needed to be done in efforts to keep this project alive. So this is very interesting to me. You know, someone kind of going by the book, because when it comes to what Yuzu did, I feel like at first it wasn't something that was just, you know, completely based on piracy and, you know, where to get the latest games and how to avoid buying Nintendo Switch games. Essentially, I feel like it started out as like a community project, as an emulator project, like we've seen time and time again from all these other places, a thing of preservation. Because yes, you could say, well, what's the point of preserving a game right now? And, you know, you're kind of not wrong, but what about Super Mario 3D All-Stars? If you didn't buy that game during the limited time window, maybe you didn't have a Nintendo Switch during that time frame, but if you didn't buy that game during that limited time window, you have no way to play those games. And yes, you can play the individual titles released on their respective consoles, but there are some slight enhancements done to these games that are only seen in these versions of the games. Same thing with that Fire Emblem game that was a limited time thing as well. Games get delisted all of the time, so there is a reason to have something like this out there in order to make sure that these games games or compilations or delisted games don't get completely lost. Now, unfortunately, what a lot of people do is they use this to buy the latest and greatest Nintendo Switch games and not have to buy the game. They could just play it on an emulator. But like I said, you know, I've talked with developers and stuff like that. If you watch Game and Talk, which is our bi-weekly Nintendo podcast on the Spawncast network, link in the description box down below. If we get to 500 backers, that becomes a weekly podcast. But we had Celia, who's head of marketing over at Yacht Club Games, like Shovel Knight and stuff like that. And that's not really a very hot topic amongst their community because they feel like people who emulate the game were probably never going to buy the game in the first place. And they've had people come up to them at conventions and be like, hey, I pirated one of your games a long time ago. I'm sorry. Here's $20. You know, thank you for making the game. So, you know, it's not a blanket thing with emulation. It's not a blanket sort of statement when it comes to stuff like that. So I think this is pretty cool. And I hope that they are successful in managing to, you know, circumvent whatever Nintendo is going to do. And I think this is a very good thing, and this will be an emulator that I'm on the lookout for with Suyu. Now, before we wrap this video up, like I said, I was going to tell you why I was in a bad mood. Basically, I had to do a bunch of errands today. I had to get an emissions test done. And so I went to this garage that I found online that did emissions, and like I pulled in and there's just cars everywhere. So it's like very tight, like driving through there. So I park and I get out and a guy comes out. I'm like, yeah, I need an emissions test. And he's like, okay, pull into this garage hub. And like they have a car like blocking the garage bays. And then that moves when you come up to do it, like very ghetto shit, like very, very ghetto. And I was just like, this is kind of strange, bro. And I couldn't get into the bay. And the guy's like, oh no, just come on. You're fine. You're fine. I wasn't fine. I scraped the front of my car and now I'm pissed off. Now I'm heated because this is my baby. This is my main car. And then I failed emissions because I just had work done on the car like 2 weeks ago. And they're like, oh, well, they reset your O2 sensors and your catalytic converter, so it's not pulling up. You need to drive it more. And I'm like, what? What? I just got the car serviced. Everything was fine at the servicing. Just pass me. I buffed most of the scratches out, but I know it's there. And that pisses me off. I need to get a wrap on that car or something. Jesus Christ. Anyways, thank you for coming to my little therapy session. Let me know what you think of Suyu in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel and you're not turned off by my ramblings, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. I am a little disheartened. The girl from Kotaku who did the Sweet Baby Inc. article, she blocked me. She blocked me on Twitter because she was complaining about something, and I put a funny gif of a girl with a megaphone saying, I am a victim. I mean, these people have a victim complex. Like, get the fuck over yourself. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.